Hello, fellow book readers. My name is John, and today we are going to discuss my weekly reading update. So, this week I read 4 books. I did say I was either going to get 3 or 4 this week because there was one longer novel in there, and yeah, that's exactly what happened. I actually finished the longer novel like an hour ago, so very, very close to taking that longer novel into the next week. But I was able to finish it, and I'm able to discuss it today. But anyway, as always, there will be spoilers when I talk about books because that's just how I like to do things. I think it's much easier to give a review with spoilers. With that being said, I will list all 4 books I am talking about down below. But let's start off today. Let's start off with the first book I read this past week, which was Water Moon by Samantha Sotto Yambao. And I am probably saying that name wrong. I apologize. But I will say that I did very much enjoy this book. I gave it 3.5 stars. I thought it was very good. It's another one of those, and this is what I'm noticing about these standalone fantasy books that I have been reading in what I deem to be standalone September. The atmosphere in these books are so like vivid and alive. This is another atmospheric fantasy for sure. It's also a portal fantasy. Think like Chronicles of Narnia or The Phantom Tollbooth or even like Harry Potter in that vein. So this book stars our protagonist named Hannah, who is running a pawn shop from which her father just retired. But this isn't any pawn shop; it's a magical pawn shop that only shows up for people that are desperate. And in that pawn shop, you can sell your choices or regrets. But it turns out there's more to it than that. Those choices and regrets are actually a piece of your soul. And obviously, the people that are giving these choices and regrets away don't know that. This book begins with her father retiring, and then her father goes missing. And he staged sort of like a kidnapping, but it wasn't really. He just ran away. But the pawn shop is wrecked, and one of the choices is missing. So Hannah and this lovely stranger that just enters the pawn shop the next morning go on to look for him. And there's a ton of action, ton of twists and turns. That's the highlight of this book, is not only the atmosphere but the twists. There's 3 major twists, and all of them are done really well and revealed really well. The backstory is Hannah's mother was executed by our antagonists for stealing a choice or a soul. So yeah, that's one of the twists. But the other 2 twists are that that the choices are actually just souls that we're stealing, and that's actually 4 twists. And then the other 2 twists are that the souls that have been stolen kind of are what we used to make Hannah and the other protagonist, and they're actually from the other world and not from this pawn shop world. Really good twist. They were revealed excellently. This book has a very, very satisfying ending that you might not see coming, because the way the book sort of has a false ending that is so good. Like, I bought the false ending. I was like, okay, this isn't happening. And then I bought it because she went on with this false ending for like a couple chapters, and it was not too long, but like long enough where you could buy it. And then the real ending happens, and it's very happy. So why is it only 3.5 stars and not 4 stars into the great category? Like, again, 3.5 stars for me is a very good book, so I'm not even really criticizing it. But I would say the things that keep it out of the great category is the romance. It happens almost immediately. Like, it's a little bit too instant. Didn't feel like there was enough growth there. Didn't love that. I also didn't think the chemistry was super great. And I think the climax scene itself was a bit flat. It was still good, and like the right things happened there, but I thought the action could have been better in that scene, if that makes sense. But overall, I had a very good time reading this, again, mostly for the atmosphere and the twists, and I thought, the 2 main characters were very easy to root for. And the second standalone novel that I read this week was A Song to Drown Rivers by Liang. Again, I might be saying that name wrong, and I really do apologize. This is another 3.5 star book for me. It's very good. I really enjoyed my time here. This story is based on the legend of Ishi. I'm not sure how you say that name either, who was one of the 4 great beauties of ancient China. And I didn't know anything about this legend, so this was all new to me. So perhaps I was surprised about things in this book that I shouldn't have been surprised about, that aren't really like supposed to be surprises if you know the legend. But I didn't know the legend, so there were a lot of things that surprised me in this book, and I thought this book was fast paced. It was really fast paced. I read this thing in like a day and a half. I really, really, really enjoyed the character work in this book. I thought Zishi herself was a great character, very easy to root for. I thought both kings were very interesting characters, especially the king whose kingdom she is going into to infiltrate in the Wu Kingdom. I forget the character's name, but he was such a good character, and I liked them together, even though he's like not a good person. It was really weird, but by the end of the book, I was like, I felt bad for him when he died. Like, I didn't want him to die. So yeah, did really good job with that one, I thought. And some of the other characters are Family, who is like the other main male protagonist in this book. And I thought he was really well written, and I thought their chemistry was really good together. His and Zishi's. And then there's Zishi's friend, who I'm not even going to try to pronounce her name because I'm definitely not going to get it right, who dies, and her death is very tragic, but I thought she was a really well written character before that death. And the book is short, but even with that shortness, she's written about enough where you can care about her significantly. So that was like the big moment in the series, and I was like, okay, well, this is crazy. That would have been good enough for me. But then this book has like one of the craziest twist endings I've read ever, and I did not see it coming, and perhaps I should have. But when Zishi is drowned in the river, and yeah, by the title of the book, I probably should have saw that one coming. By the king who she helped win, like she helped him win his kingdom back, and then he drowns her in the end. It was insane, batshit crazy. And you would think this book would end on like a sour note, like a sad note, and it kind of does, but it also ends on like a spark of hope, I would say. And they're reunited in the end, her and Family, in the afterlife, and I thought that was really well done. Kind of cheesy, but it didn't matter. It was done so well, written so well. Again, this book is just very good. Why isn't it like a 4? Why did I give it 4 stars? I just think that the action wasn't exactly the best. But again, this isn't really an action book, so I don't know why I thought it would be better than it was. And I did think that the book was a little bit too quick at times, if that makes sense. Not that the pacing, like I said, the pacing was good, but it did feel kind of fast. And I like quick books, but this one I felt could have perhaps been a bit longer. But overall, these are minor complaints, and this book was still very good. 3.5 stars. Maybe it didn't peak as high as a great book does, but like I said, the twist ending and the character work here are top notch. So yeah, really enjoyed it. I definitely would recommend this book to other people, for sure. Okay, then next up I read The Goblin Emperor by Katherine Addison. I ended up giving this one 3 stars, which is just a good book, but again, it's a good book. I enjoyed my time here. I did think that this book was going to be better than that, though. I thought for sure I was going to end up giving this book 4 or even 5 stars by the praise I've heard of it online. And I still really enjoyed my stuff here, my time here. I thought Maya is one of my favorite characters I read this year. Maya is such an easy to root for character here. This book explores the politics of this kingdom, because Maya is sort of this, not a bastard child, he's a legitimate child, but he's the 4th child of this king with his 4th wife, and he's unwanted and exiled, and when his father and his brothers all die in this tragic crash, and Maya has to become king, nobody in the kingdom wants him to be king, because he's this half goblin, half elf character, and there's discrimination, and people don't trust him, and there's other people that want power, and they see a weak king. So this book is really about the politics of the kingdom and about Maya himself as a character. Now, there is an overarching story here, because it turns out Maya's father and his brothers were actually killed. The aircraft was messed with, and Maya finds this out very early on in the story, and there's an investigation going on in the background. So you would think that would be the plot of the story, and it kind of is, but it also really isn't, because we don't really ever focus on that. We kind of do, but it's mostly just going on in the background. What we're focusing on is the politics of this kingdom and the relationships and the theming. The theming is really good. It's about, I think one of the major themes of this book is friendship, and can you have friends as a king or a man in power or a person in power? And the answer at the end is a resounding yes. It's a different kind of friendship, but you definitely can. And I think the way the book tells that story is very well done. And there's also some really like tense moments in this book with there's a couple assassination attempts. Especially the first one is like wild, and I thought that was written like really well. Where Maya's sister-in-law and his like advisor, his like chancellor, are trying to get rid of him and make him abdicate, and I mean, that one was so good. I was very invested in that one. The second one, I wasn't really that invested in as much, I would say, but they were both good for what it was. And the second one is more interwoven into the plot of why his father was killed in the first place. So yeah, again, there's a lot I really loved about this book. Now, why I didn't get into the 3.5 or 4-star range, my cons of this book are it does take a while to understand what's going on in this book. And I don't mean like the plot or the characters, but this book throws out a lot of world building at you. A lot. There's a ton of world building in this. And this book sort of invents its own language and the way people are titled and called, and names mean different things. And it's a lot to pick up on. Now, this book does provide you with a like sort of glossary in the beginning so you can keep track of this stuff. But unless you're taking notes, I think it's really hard to get a handle on it until you're like 50 to 60% of the way through the book. And that bothered me a little bit, like more than it probably should have, but it just did. And I do think this book sometimes is a little dry. Not in the sense that there's nothing going on, but it is a bit slower paced. Not badly paced, but it is definitely on the slow side, if that makes sense. I also think that this book sometimes threw in some characters that would just not need it. But I get why it was done, because Maya is trying to dive into all these different like court politics, and you have to introduce all these different characters. But I did feel like it was a lot to be thrown at me at one time. I do wish I took more notes when I read this book, because there was a ton here that just took me a while to pick up on, that I think if I was taking notes, I would have picked up on it earlier. But I don't know that you should be required to have to take notes to get everything in a book. And this book definitely sort of required that. That being said, like I said, there's both parts of this book that I really loved are Maya, and I do love court politics. That's why I read books like A Song of Ice and Fire, where the politics in that book are amazing. This book, is reminiscent of that in certain ways. So yeah, there's a lot here I loved, and the theming, again. So those three things alone make the book a good book, and I will always remember Maya and the way he talks. I think Maya is just such a great character. So yeah, this book was good, and I'm very happy I read it. I gave it 3 stars. It just didn't work for me as well as it worked for some other people, I would say. Okay, then the last book I read this week was The Lions of Al-Rassan by Gavriel K. And I love this book, yeah. This book delivered everything I thought it would deliver on. I gave it 4 stars. It's a great book. What can I even say? It's more of a historical fiction than a fantasy, for sure. It's based on, medieval Spain, and there's 3 fake religions, but they're clearly supposed to represent the Christians, the Muslims, and the Judaism, and I think the book really offers unique perspective on, and you get 3 main characters, one from each like sector, and in the book they all intertwine, and there's a holy war going on, and I think the book really does a good job with that, and I really was attached to almost every character that was introduced, but especially Jahane, the main like physician. She was just such a good character, but so was the poet. I forget his name off the top of my head, and the general. He was also very good, and they all had unique personalities, and I really loved the characterization of this in this book. This book had a ton of great twists and some really, really good action scenes, like really, really good. And then the end with the duel, and when Rodrigo dies to Amar, even though they love each other, and Jahane has to watch, and she's asking the question, is it okay to love 2 people, because she loves both of them. It's just really well done. And then the epilogue, because you don't know who dies in the actual fight, because they don't tell you the name of who dies. Then you get to the epilogue and you realize Rodrigo died and Amar's still alive, and he's with Jahane in a different country. and you realize that the Christians have, or not the Christians, I forget what they're called in this, but essentially the Christians have now taken over this version of Spain. Again, they use a different name for Spain, but it is Spain. It is based on Spain, I should say. It's not actually Spain. Is really good and really strong and really powerful. And there's some really great moments in this book. When the Caliph sends these two assassins to go kill his two brothers who he's afraid are going to inherit the throne, and they're stopped. It's a really tense moment. That's probably my favorite scene in the book, I think. But there's just so much philosophy, and there's some good poetry in here. I'm not even a poetry person, but the poet in here, one of our main male protagonists, is also a poet. It's done really, really well. This book is long, though. It's 650 pages almost. And I will say it's on the slower side pacing-wise, which is one of the reasons that it didn't get 5 stars for me. It's just a little bit too slow. Like I said, there's a ton of action scenes in here, so you would think it's faster than it actually is. I think the threads that tie the action scenes together are good, but they're definitely slow, if that makes sense. This book also has a ton of world building in here, and it's not as much as I would say The Goblin Emperor, but it's a lot. And it took me a minute to get everything down, but I would say by like about 35% of the way through the book, I had all the names down, everything I needed to know. And this book starts out on a bang with this like brutal massacre in this city, and you don't know who's good and who's bad and who's right and who's wrong. I like that the book doesn't just spoon feed you this, because there's some good and some wrong on each side, and it very, very much draws on your emotion strings. And the overarching theme of this book is love, and I think by the end of the book it does a really good job going over that theme. So yeah, there's not much here I didn't like. Like I said, just a tiny bit of pacing issues kept it from being in the perfect tier for me. But overall, this book delivered on every way I wanted it to. It's an easy 4 stars for me. A great book. And I'm super happy I read it, and I'm super happy it delivered. It did take me 5 days to read it, which is the most of any book I read this month. But I liked it a lot. Or I shouldn't say 5, like 4.5. Yeah, just an awesome book. Front to back. And that is my week of reading. It was 4 books. None of them were bad, but every other week I've had multiple books get into the 4-star or higher this week. This week I only had one, The Lion of Al-Rassan, but it is my 3rd favorite book I've read this month, and I thought it was great. So overall, this is a super good week for me. There wasn't one bad book this week for me, or one book that didn't work for me this week, which happened every other week. Every other week had at least one book that I either hated or that just didn't work for me at all. This week all 4 books worked for me, so super satisfying week of reading. And I hope this week I'm able to finish 5 books, but we'll see. I mean, every book I plan on reading this week is on the shorter side, so I think I should be able to finish 5, but I'm not 100% sure. Anyway, let me know down below what you read this week, or if you read any of the books I read. Let me know what you thought.